And the filing period is officially over, and the race for the Charlotte City Council has begun. We have several individuals who have entered not only for the mayoral race, but also the Charlotte City Council at large and the several district races. Today, we talk about them on the State of Mecklenburg at CLT Blog. Joining us today here at CLT Blog, to my far left, Dr. Michael Bitzer, Associate Professor of Politics at Catawba College. To my left, Mr. Gideon Moore, the Chair of the Mecklenburg County Republican Party. To my right, Joel Ford, the past Chair of the Mecklenburg County Democratic Party. And to my far right, Chris Miller, reporter from WBT Radio. Now, guys, let's talk real quick about the past history of the Charlotte City Council. It seems like we have more people engaged this year than we have in past previous years. Why do you think that is? Michael?
I think it's probably a natural conduit of what we're seeing at the national level as well. I mean, national politics will always trickle down to local politics. People are, we're getting into the phase of starting a major campaign in 2012. Some people will start to look at local politics and say, are there any tea leaves that we can literally or figuratively look into to see what 2012 will be like? So I think, a lot of this is going to be a trickle down, but it's setting the stage for a competitive year next year.
I think it's a new phenomenon, in my opinion, as it relates to what the national political scene is about versus the local. Locally here, we're a little bit more civil. I mean, we have a tendency between Democrats and Republicans to get along a lot better, whereas in the national politics, there's clearly a polarization and a huge divide right now in what's going on in Washington. So I think it's a little bit new, in my opinion, what's going on here locally.
Yeah, I agree in terms of there's just the number of people who are getting engaged in the process, both at the primary level as well as new candidates, people who may not have thought of or even considered running for office before, who are throwing their hat in the ring, just because a lot of it is, from our perspective on the Republican side, Tea parties and other folks and other activities that are getting people involved in the process.
Now, Chris, from a reporter's standpoint, you cover most of the city beat here in Charlotte. Have you seen an increase in people's participation from a citizen standpoint, or do you think that's a reflection of that, or is there something else you think is driving this year's participation?
Well, I think one factor could be, going back to Dr. Bitzer, that last year was very good for someone who was not an incumbent. Someone sees that in Charlotte, thinking, well, I'll give it a try. They're not always going to be successful, but hey, why not? Why not throw your hat in the ring? Now, I have seen there seems to be more citizen engagement at the city hall level, where you have more people coming to city hall to speak at the citizens forum, getting their word in, because there have been some hot button issues down there with the taxi cab, for instance, the airport taxi program. So there have been a lot of people engaged as far as policy. As far as election goes, it remains to be seen.
Here in Charlotte, we have some interesting demographics. The Democratic Party has a decided advantage. We've got 49% of registered voters here in Mecklenburg County are Democrat, 25% are registered Republican, and another 25% are registered unaffiliated. Based on what you all have seen from Charlotte politics, do you think that means the Democrats are going to have a decided advantage? Or do you think that what happens in city politics is not going to necessarily translate to one partisan advantage or the other? Michael?
Well, typically, I mean, nationally what we're seeing is when you look at major urban areas, that is becoming more and more Democratic strongholds. I mean, if you look at 2008, Barack Obama, within the Charlotte city limits, got 69% of the vote.
Right.
If you look outside of the city limits, but still inside Mecklenburg, it was a 51-49 split. So, it is a heavily Democratic, with the suburbs tending to trend more Republican in that regard.
But I think it's also interesting to note that the same Democratic majority that you talk about in the city of Charlotte elected a Republican mayor for 14 straight years. So the city of Charlotte's a little bit unique in the fact that I think we're really looking more at the candidate than we really are with political affiliation.
It's that, but if you go back in time, if you go back to when Pat McCrory first ran, Mecklenburg tended to be a solidly Republican county in that regard. It's only been in the past couple of election cycles that you tended to see it blue breaking that I-70, what I call the I-77 corridor of solid red in terms of running.
Well, I could take you back to the Kerry Bush campaign, and Kerry carried Mecklenburg County over Bush.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Michael, I think, has a point in that there was a lot of folks with the Bev Perdue campaign that were doing lots of walks around certain neighborhoods, and there were folks who would say, well, why shouldn't I vote for Pat McCrory? Isn't he a Democrat? And they were talking about the education that was needing to happen because a lot of folks in Charlotte were just remembering the name, not necessarily the party.
Right.
So I think that would indicate that not just because there's a decided demographic advantage, it doesn't necessarily mean that the candidate is going to win.
I'm laughing only because if you take a look at the Republican mayor, who is partly, in no small way, responsible for an arena that we voted against,
Yep.
the light rail, which is no small ticket item, and you can also take a look at this $300 million underperforming asset that we have in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And so his names are written all over that, and so I could see how you could get that confusion.
Well, depending upon the votes, it was a Democratic majority that voted all those things in. So
Yeah, but he ran point on it.
all right, well, we'll have to disagree on that. But now we can go to the discussion of actual mayor's race. Since we're on the topic of the mayor, let's talk about whether or not these demographics are going to be able to help the two contenders. We have, of course, our incumbent, Anthony Fox, who was a Charlotte native, against Scott Stone, who moved here, I believe it was 12 years ago, correct, Gideon? And he works for Merrick. He is an engineer. Gideon, I'm going to start with you. Scott has a unique platform based on job creation.
Right.
Is that going to resonate well with his base, and do you think he's going to be able to have some crossover appeal?
Well, to go back to your question about the demographics, I'd argue I'd much rather, as a Republican, I'd much rather have the 49-25% advantage. But that said, this is an off-year election, and it's going to go down to the organizational strength of both parties and who can turn out which votes and which candidates are going to be able to draw out the votes that are going to be supportive. And I think in the recession that we've been in, jobs is a compelling issue, again, up and down, whether you're hearing it at the national level, you're hearing it in Congress, and it's going to be a compelling issue here in Charlotte. And so I do believe that is something that's going to drive out the vote for both his base and the Republicans, but also it should have some crossover appeal for those who are looking at the situation and seeing whether or not they want to continue with the status quo.
Now, Joel, a lot of folks have been drawing a distinction or similarity to when Harvey Gantt ran against Sue Myrick for mayor. Do you see any similarities in that, or do you think Anthony is going to persevere and go on through and be able to carry this election?
Well, I think if you take a look at Sue Myrick and you take a look at Scott Stone is an unknown.
Okay.
I think he's going to have to build up a name ID, and it'll be interesting to see what the national or even the state Republican Party or even these outside groups, how much money, if they're looking to put any into this mayoral race, similar to the way that the Democrats took over in Tampa, and you got a Republican convention there. So there's a little bit of talk on our side about what the outside groups are going to do. But if you take a look at his campaign coffers, clearly he has not been able to generate a whole lot of momentum on his own. So I don't see a whole lot of similarities between what Sue Myrick was able to do by upsetting an incumbent, Harvey Gantt, versus what a mayor right now who has over $500,000 in his campaign coffers.
And plus, Sue Myrick had once run before. She ran in '85 and lost to Dave Berryhill in the primary, and she was on city council. So it was not as if she was an unknown commodity in Charlotte. And my answer is a question behind, but as far as the demographic goes, I heard someone say either the night that Anthony Fox was elected in '09 or the day after that Charlotte would never see a Republican mayor again because of the demographics. I think if Barack Obama had not been elected president, it might have changed because the Fox campaign took a lot of pages from the Obama playbook in some of the speeches and some of the organizations, and it proved successful for the president, and it was successful for the mayor. So whether it has to do with being a Democrat or Republican, I think it has to do with the more effective playbook for getting out the vote.
I differ on that primarily because I was directly involved in the campaign, and I think I think John Lasseter's campaign has to take responsibility for the campaign that they ran. If you take a look at some of the mistakes that I thought that he made, and I'll give you a big glaring one. Most polls and statistics show you that billboards are the least effective method to get your message out. John Lasseter had a ton of those. When we would do reconnaissances on the campaign, you go over to the John Lasseter campaign, he had 3 cars in his campaign office. So if you went to the Anthony Fox campaign, we had a ton of volunteers working the streets trying to make sure that our candidate got elected. And so I think you got to look at really what the strategies were and the messages, because I think a lot of people view John as a business person. Keep it in mind, this is a strong city manager form of government. And I think the city of Charlotte and the residents here really realize, is this the type of person that we need competing with Kurt Walton, or do we need someone like an Anthony Fox that can complement what the city manager's job and responsibility is, which is to run the city?
And what about theory, though? though, Michael. I think it's more interesting to see the national picture, because more often than not, national issues will drive the Charlotte mayor's race just as much as local issues. Do you see national issues coming into play at this?
Oh, I mean, it's all jobs and it's all the economy. And if anybody's talking about anything else, the voters are not going to be concerned about it. You see it at the national level, you're going to see it at the state level, and you definitely see it at the local level. The issues of unemployment, how do you create jobs, how do you keep jobs? I mean, all of those, when you're talking about pocketbook issues, when that is the #1 issue, nothing else really gets on board and gets on the radar screen. And so the candidates, to kind of follow up on the thread so far, you've got to have a ground war, but you've also got to have the air war as well. And it's a combination of which is the most effective at different levels in terms of campaigns. Typically at the local level, it's going to be the grassroots, it's going to be the ground war, the mobilization effect. When you're talking about 21 to maybe 25% voter turnout coming out, I mean, literally every vote will count in these types of elections.
All right, well, we'll see what happens with the mayor's race, but let's move on to city council. As you all know, we have, as Joel said, a strong manager form of government. So the mayor does not have a vote on any issue except for zoning, and he is able to break a tie in the event that the council ties. So in reality, policy is mostly set by our city council. 4 of those individuals come from the at-large election. In the past years, we've had split votes, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. But last year, in 2009, we saw for the first time 3 Democrats, 1 Republican elected. This year, there is no primary on the Republican side. However, there is a primary on the Democratic side.
Potentially.
Potentially. Okay, at the moment, there is. Filed at the moment for Democratic city councilman at large is Patrick Cannon, Claire Fallon, David Howard, Beth Pickering, and Jerisha Abraham Rory. On the Republican side, we have Christopher Haley, Muhammad Mustafa, Edwin Peacock III, and Curtis Watkins, along with the Libertarian candidate Alexander Vuchnik. So basically looking at this, Joel, I have to ask, do you think that the Democrats, if they go through a primary, are going to find themselves at a disadvantage?
No, I think you'll find that we will not have a primary, and I think that what you'll find is that Patrick Cannon, who's an incumbent, David Howard, who's an incumbent, and I think we have to figure out who that other Democrat's going to be, because as I told our team in 2009, I really felt strongly that we could take 3 of the 4 at-large seats, and we strategized around it, and we were successfully be able to do that. So it'll be interesting to see how this actually plays out now that I'm no longer chair.
Well, what about from the Republican side? Gideon, do you think that the Republicans, since they don't have a primary, do they have a strategy to capitalize on this? I have to admit, I do represent one of the Republicans on the, Curtis Watkins, but from the party standpoint, do you think that there's anything that the Republicans can do to combat the fact that the Democrats look like they might take 3 seats again?
Well, if the benefit of not having a primary, it allows us as a party to circle around and focus on the candidates and go on and start the groundwork and working those districts and working those precincts to make sure the folks know their names, folks know what they're about, and we can start now working for them, as opposed to waiting until mid-September. On the other side, there is, arguably, sometimes some folks argue there's a benefit to having the especially when you have the primary in mid-September, that you get the free press, so to speak, of the folks fighting back and forth, and people are paying attention. But that said, from the party perspective, we're happy to have our nominees, and we're happy to be able to focus on them from now on.
All right, now, the demographics are exactly the same as the mayor's race. You're looking at a 2-to-1 disadvantage. So issues in this case for the Republicans are going to be very important. What issues, Michael and Chris, do you see as potential positives for the Democrats, and what do you see as positives for the Republicans, Michael?
Well, I think both sides are going to have to be campaigning on jobs and job creation. I mean, that's just going to be the core central issue, not just this year, but next year as well. And both of them are going to have to basically define how they're going to go about doing that. The issues that voters are going to care about, it's pocketbook, it's how does this hit me in the wallet type of issue. So, I can't see anything beyond that. If a candidate is talking about something other than jobs, I would say they need to get back on the script or find something else to run for.
And I think it's going to be the same issues we find in the mayor's race. The mayor will point to the fact that, and granted, some of these things are not something that a city official engineers, but it happened on their watch.
Okay.
So the accelerated completion of 485, the revised transit timeline that we're going to see. The job creation, the jobs announcements we've had in the past 2 years now, from Time Warner to CellGuard, that brought the president here. Okay. So it will be jobs. It will be all across the board. It'll be what happened under our watch during the past 2 years, and also what I'm interested to see is what factor it will have that Susan Burgess is not on the ballot this year. She was the top vote getter in 2009. Yeah, and so I'm interested to see where those votes go this year.
Okay. Now, Gideon, as the Republican Party, what do you see the Republicans focusing on and being able to come forward and say, these are the issues that we think are going to be able to push our people forward? And Joel, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Right. We'll be focusing on the jobs issue and focusing on the fact of building a government that works to create jobs, that works to get regulation and anything that's an impediment to building jobs and growing jobs out of the way. That said, some of our candidates bring different issues to the table. For instance, Chris Haley brings a background in law enforcement, and to the extent that there is some uncertainty and some concern on things like what happened on the riots and things in Uptown, and even what you're seeing around the world. So there's some uncertainty on those things, and so he can bring a unique perspective to that, while still also continuing to focus on jobs.
Well, I think it'll be interesting from the outside looking in from the Republican standpoint on how they're going to actually treat Chris Haley this year. If you recall, he did run for sheriff as an African-American Republican candidate against a Democratic sheriff here in Mecklenburg County, and he lost handily. And the information that I'm hearing, that the Republican Party did not support him. So it'll be interesting to see what the local Republican Party does for an African-American who's actually on a ballot for the at-large seats. But I got a confession to say, I think that the local parties can only do as much as the quality candidates that we have running. So it's really important that you have a quality candidate that's going to run. One of the advantages that we had in 2009, we had David Howard, who's a local guy, community guy, who had been on the zoning board, it seemed like forever. So he had some name ID. He was able to raise some money to be able to be successful. I think really, if just off of my opinion, I think you're looking at Patrick Cannon, I think you're looking at Edward Peacock, and you're looking at David Howard, and I think everybody else is playing for fourth place. Yeah.
So 3-1 is what you're saying.
Well, I think that the interesting thing is that this new candidate, Curtis Watkins, who's a Republican, who, in my opinion, is an unknown, but I heard he has some corporate backing. Think about, and this is what I'm thinking about, I'm trying to get our folks on the Democratic Party side to think about, is Pat Mumford. I think Pat Mumford came from nowhere, but one of the things that he did have, which is what a corporate sponsor to help him raise $100,000. If you can raise $100,000 at a large Kansas City Charlotte, you can buy ID.
Yeah. Okay. And that's the number one key for any candidate, is if you don't have the power of incumbency behind you, you've got to have that name recognition, because when people walk into the ballot booth, the names that they recognize are the names they are typically going to vote for in a very low information election like this.
Right. Well, looking at the race right now, judging from the fact that we had a 3-1 split in 2009 and a 2-2 split in 2007, just real quick down the line, what do you think the split's going to be in 2011, Michael?
I'd have to stay with status quo, 3-1.
3-1, Gideon?
I'm the Republican chairman. I'm going for a sweep. I'm not,
Joel?
I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for us this year. There's some unknown factors there, and it'll be interesting to see how the Democratic candidates step up and rise to the occasion.
I'm going to say at this point 3-1, but I would not be surprised if it's 2-2.
Okay. Well, good. Let's move on to the districts. We've got some very interesting district races coming up this year, and it seems that there's not going to be any lack of controversy or contest there. The first district, of course, as we know, is Patsy Kenzie's district. District 1 has one of the largest districts in the city. In that area, you have 66,135 voters. The demographic split is 53% Democrat, 20% Republican, and 26% unaffiliated, with your ethnicity split 35% African American, 58% white, and then 7% for the rest. Here we have two white candidates running. Is David?
He's African American.
David is African American. I did not know that. I have not yet met David. So all right. So we have an African American Republican running against a white Democratic woman. What do we think?
We're happy to have a candidate who will be able to provide the voters of that district an option. That's the problem we've seen, and what I saw as coming in as the chairman of the MEC GOP, is that in a lot of times we cede and we lose elections because of these demographics by not running candidates at all. And we think it's a good option to, especially in a turnout election like this, to be able to put candidates forward and to work to help them get elected in whatever way we can.
I think the first 5 districts generally have been anywhere from 74 to 83% voting for Barack Obama. And what this indicates to me is Charlotte and Mecklenburg is much like the rest of the country in that everybody is sorting themselves. We're basically going and moving into areas that we feel comfortable with, that is much like who we are, how we vote, the way we live, and this is typical across the country. But what it's doing is it's making these districts so heavily one way or the other that, you know, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion in terms of who's going to win in the general election.
I was just going to say, I know that you're going off of your numbers and statistics, and you're going off of national data. Knowing Patsy Kenzie the way that I know her, she won't be running off of what Barack Obama has accomplished.
No, I didn't say that. I just said these districts tend to vote this way, and there tends to be the down ballot effect. But when you're in an off presidential election year, certainly things are going to be different.
And that's why I think that Patsy, based upon the fact that she's a known quantity, she's an incumbent, and people in the Dilworth and in that district who are very, very powerful will continue to stay with what they know.
And plus, any challenger has to give the voters a reason to change horses. And Patsy Kenzie is not a lightning rod city councilman. She can be effective for the district, but there's no, as a journalist, I can't point to say something that she has caused a controversy down at City Hall.
Maybe it's just me. Maybe I remember this a little bit better. But what about the Save Charlotte music issue? Now, I think that group got what they wanted off of that issue. They got a noise ordinance that they felt was a little more favorable to the local music scene. But if David Michael Rice is able to tap into this artistic, affluent group who feels that they're not being touched, basicly run an edge campaign, will that make a difference?
I don't think so, because at the meeting, the leader of the campaign, effectively said, "We're fine with the new ordinance, the rewritten ordinance now." I was at the meeting, and Mac McCarley, the city attorney, said, it's your time for comment, because this was the public comment hearing, and he said, "I'm fine with it." So I don't think it's as much of an aggravator as it might have been before.
If it hadn't been changed.
Right.
I think the professor will agree with me, but based upon the quantitative analysis of that district,
there's no way.
Yeah, I mean, that small little contingency of a group.
Take this into account. If you self-identify as a Democrat, you're typically going to vote 90% of the time that way. If you self-identify as a Republican, you're going to vote 90% of that way. I mean, the numbers, numbers don't lie. And that's just, with the voter registration and the past precedent of that district voting the way they are, much like District 2, 3, 4, 5, I mean, there's just, numbers are there.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Now, that is a general election.
Slogan,
Yeah. Now, that's a general election. Yeah. That election is going to take place, and early voting starts in October, and that general election day will be November 8th. Now, we have a primary, which is actually starting in, I think, less than 9 days. August 25th, so early voting starts, and we turn right around and have a general September 13th. One of the individuals who is challenged, that is probably one of the least likely people to have seen a challenger this year, was James Mitchell in District 2. James, as we all know, is the current president of the National League of Cities, 12-year sitting incumbent. The demographics in District 2 are heavily in favor of the Democratic Party, with almost 60% of the district being African-American and 64% of the district being Democrat. But there's no Republican. There are 4 Democratic challengers.
That's interesting that the Republican Party local Republican Party didn't find a candidate for District 2, but they found one for District 1.
Well, Gideon would know more about the recruitment process than I would. So, but here are the 4 individuals. We got Cameron Webb Gardner, I'm not familiar with. Greg Greer, not familiar with. Now Vivian C. Mitchell, who, if I believe, is James's ex-wife, and of course the incumbent James Mitchell. Joel, How is the party going to handle this?
I don't know the Cameron Webb Gardner. I do know Greg Greer, who is an associate minister over at Friendship Missionary Baptist Church, which is one of our larger or mega churches here in the city of Charlotte. So it'll be interesting what kind of dynamic that's going to play into this local race. And then obviously you've got his ex-wife who is running against him, which personally I don't think anything good can come from that.
I mean, Chris, you covered James a good bit. I mean, he's always consistently out inside in the chamber. He comes off the dais to talk to his voting base. He's very involved in the community. Do you see any possibilities of any of these individuals, from a news standpoint, being able to garner enough ID to be able to beat him in a Democratic primary?
Well, I know from a news standpoint, everyone is going to watch to see what happens between Vivian and James, to see if it becomes a fun time. Airing of dirty laundry between these two. You know, whether that matters to voters, what happened in their home, you know, if they were able to separate policy from, personal life. And again, as far as these other challengers, I'll give the same answer for all the districts. Why should you change, elected official in this district? And if any challenger can make a concrete point of, why didn't, Councilman X do this? You might have something to run with. But if you cannot give, the voters their reason to change horses, then you're lost.
I think even if you're able to come up with that narrative, and I think maybe someone could argue that they could come up with that narrative.
It's still James.
Or anyone can come up with it.
You have to, right? You have to be able. You have to raise the money.
Yep. Yeah. Sure.
And as an incumbent, he's a National League of City president. I'm sure.
There's going to be some outside.
He's going to have some funds available to get his message out. To be able to make this work. So God bless him for wanting to run. But I think you have to be realistic about what can you actually accomplish. I think in some of these candidates' minds, even if I lose, I still win, meaning that I get my name on a ballot and some people get a chance to see me for future races.
Yep. Right. Yep. Now that race is going to be fun to watch, but one of the races that I think is going to be more interesting from an issue standpoint as opposed to just a straight drama standpoint is District 3. We have a very interesting primary there with Sven Deal, local attorney and an owner of a local pub running, LaWanna Mayfield, openly homosexual candidate, African-American, and Warren Turner, sitting incumbent. An interesting fact, Sven Deal actually was a classmate of Anthony Fox's at West Charlotte and grew up with him, and one of the reasons he's running is because he feels that he's going to be able to better represent that district than the rest of the folks in the primary. But ultimately, whoever gets out of that primary is going to face a general and a Tea Party candidate, Ed Toney. So based on the demographics, it looks like the primary is going to determine who wins, but will that be the case, Joel?
Absolutely. If you take a look at the demographics of District 3, which I'm very, very familiar with, coupled with the fact that you've got a Tea Party candidate, I really question the sanity of a Tea Party candidate running in District 3 when you take a look at the demographics, which are heavily African-American and heavily Democratic. So that's an interesting choice that the Republican Party, and I know you didn't have a whole lot to do with it. You can't really tell people what to do, but that's an interesting choice. But taking a look at LaWanna Mayfield, I think that she has the best chance to present a challenge, primarily because if you take a look at her campaign financial records, she's been able to raise some money. Yeah. But I wonder if, based upon, because most African Americans tend to be traditionally conservative, so based upon her sexual orientation, how is that going to play within the Democratic Party, within the African American community? And that'll be an issue to watch.
Michael, do you think that sexual orientation is going to make it an issue for this primary?
I mean, it depends on how much she wants to bring it up and how much her opponents want to bring it up in that context. And remember, we are still in the South. Charlotte can be a liberal-oriented urban area, but there is still that issue of coming across, particularly in terms of gay politics, that is going to be a hurdle to overcome.
And I can tell you right now, it's already been a turnoff. She's mentioned that a few times on the campaign stump. And again, a lot of people, Democrats, business Democrats, who've traditionally been active in District 3, don't think that that's a platform for the city council.
Yeah. All right. Now, Ed Toney, he seems serious. He seems like he's ready to run a campaign. What does he have a strategy getting? What is he planning on doing?
And for him, and some of these we recruited. Some of he self-selected and came out of the gate, filing very early. And he's a good candidate. And he made the his primary issue is the fact that he wants to provide the citizens of District 3 a choice. They haven't had a choice in the general election dating back for some time, and he wanted to provide that choice.
Yep.
And as somebody who provides a different perspective to bring to City Council.
Now, Chris, you covered the issue between Warren Turner and the City Council when he unfortunately had to go through the email scandal that Anthony Fox set up, and whether or not it was intentional or not, it brought Warren's name out to the forefront in a negative light. Do you see that being an issue in the primary based on the coverage it got and the response you saw from the public?
I would not be surprised if it's broached in the primary, and I know that's a question that will come up at least from the media going into the election. People will, reporters will ask, voters in the district on primary day. I can already guarantee you that, if someone says they're going to vote for Luana Mayfield or Sven Deal, they're going to bring up the email investigation. So obviously it will be raised in the campaign, whether it's from the candidates or from the media. It will be raised. And I do know that Councilman Turner, not long after this happened, sat down with Channel 3 and did an extensive interview where he maintains he did nothing wrong. So the campaign could boil down to that issue, but again, it's up to the candidates how much they want to bring it up, because the investigation never. A lot of people think the investigation said it did happen, but the investigation didn't say it happened. It just said that there is the preponderance of evidence that would suggest that the allegations are founded.
Right.
So they never cross the line to say that it actually happened. Just there's a lot of evidence.
You are uniquely familiar with this district. Do
Yes.
you think it's going to make a difference what happened with Warren? And
It's already having
already
a
having
difference,
it,
which
yeah.
I think is contributing to the amount of money that Luana Mayfield is able to raise.
Okay.
I think that a lot of people in District 3 were embarrassed by his behavior, whether it's perceived or the reality of it. And it'll be interesting to see how that's going to affect the number of supporters he's going to have and the amount of money as an incumbent that he's going to be able to raise.
And I know in the past, in the most recent fundraising filings, Councilman Turner's have been slim compared to what we've seen come from the Mayfield campaign.
Okay. Now, that race is interesting, and it's something a little less fireworks, I suppose, would be District 4. Michael Barnes and Larry Shannon. Michael Barnes is the sitting Democrat, ran for district attorney last year. Larry Shannon, a Republican, both African American. But District 4 is not as lopsided as most individuals, as some of the other districts. We've got a 54% advantage for the Democrats, 20% for the Republicans, 26% are unaffiliated, and that district is split pretty much down the middle: 45% African American, 45% white. Gideon, do you think that Larry is going to be able to appeal to crossover voters, and do you think that he's going to be able to have the kind of message that would be necessary to defeat a sitting council member?
I think Larry's a strong candidate. He's run before. He's got some name ID from that. And as has been raised before, in each of these cases, you have to make a compelling argument about the incumbent, about whether or not a reason to switch. And there is a reason for Michael Barnes in terms of, is he committed to District 4? Or is he looking for this to be just a next ladder? What is he going to run for something else in 2012? And so there's a reason to believe he's a strong candidate, and I think he'll put together a strong campaign.
Joel?
Well, I think Michael Barnes, if you spent any time looking at city council, is probably one of the more thoughtful, articulate city council members that we have on the Charlotte City Council, who doesn't mind asking the tough questions. And from a Democratic standpoint and from a fiscal conservative standpoint, I think that Michael will continue to resonate well in that university area, what he represents. And as long as he can continue to share with the voters in that district what he's doing and why he's continuing to do it the way he's doing, I think he'll be fine. Again, can Larry raise the money to get that narrative out? That is going to be the question.
And that's interesting, because even if he does, Michael, considering that there's two African Americans, on a theory basis, it seems like it could be possible. But do you think there's a possibility here, considering that Michael ran for DA last year?
What we generally tend to see in North Carolina politics is the Democratic registered voters percentage for a Republican to win generally has to get down to 35%. Okay. You're nowhere close in this particular district to that threshold. Now, things can change and issues can come up and candidates can be stronger than what they portend to seem, but I don't see it from looking at it from an outsider's point of view.
So, Chris, what issues are gonna play into this race?
For the District 4 race,
Yeah.
It'll go back to the tried and true issues in the district of securing the blue line extension up to the university area. What is the city doing about crime in the university area? I think that issues are not that dissimilar from other parts of the city, and the districts.
All right. Moving on to District 5, which is another district where we have a Democratic primary and then a Republican challenger. We have 3 individuals running. John Autry, individual who was active in the Democratic Party. Daryl Bonaparte, who has run before and lost before to Nancy Carter, most previously in 2007. And then a newcomer, Alex Hartley Jr., who is running, I believe, for the first time. They will face off during the primary, and then after the general, they will see Caution President, which is a local Tea Party group, and Republican Dennis Peterson. Dennis is the leader of that group. So, guys, let's talk about this. Daryl has some experience. Alex brings a fresh face, but John seems to have the support of the Democratic establishment. Joel, do you see the Democratic Party kind of splitting itself up here, or do you see them getting behind one candidate?
I can see them unofficially getting behind one candidate, primarily because of John Autry's work within the party. I know when I was the party chair, he was extremely supportive and helpful for me, and a lot of people don't forget that. Don't forget that Nancy Carter, the current incumbent right now, has officially endorsed his campaign.
Okay.
So that momentum and that kind of support and help will work in his favor as well. I think you got to look at Daryl Bonaparte's past and history. I think he's got some personal challenges there, which may come back up again on the campaign trail, which I think will make for interesting political theater. Alex is a new guy. And again, I go back to what I've been saying about these district races. Who's going to have the ability to raise the money? If you take a look at what Daryl's been able to raise, not a whole lot. You still need, in my opinion, anywhere between $30,000 to maybe $40,000 to wage a good campaign, especially for a non-incumbent.
Okay, so guys, based on the demographics in District 5, this is another. We go back to a very heavily favored Democratic district. Almost 60% of the district is Democratic. You've got 48% African American registration. It seems like in a lot of these districts getting in that the Republicans are going to have an uphill battle. Does Dennis Peterson? Do you think what is his message going to be? Is he going to be able to resonate with a lot of those voters? Because District 5 is basically a coalition district. There's a lot of African Americans, but there's also a lot of Hispanics.
It's East Charlotte.
It's East Charlotte, and is there going to be what kind of campaign is Dennis going to have to run to win?
Right. Oh, and for him, he's got a compelling story and a compelling background in terms of his past, his service to the country, and even just the benefit he has coming out of the gates. He's a fairly recent candidate, and I think he filed on the last day. But he comes with a ready-made organization within the Tea Party, and as well as within the Republican Party itself. And so, in terms of being able to get that message out and to get it out in a compelling fashion, he's gonna be able to do a decent job. For him, the benefit is the fact that he's not running against a incumbent, and the fact that he's gonna be able to make an argument of where do you want to go in the future.
How smart is it though to run on a Tea Party platform in East Charlotte? I mean, that makes no sense to me.
Well, in terms of it depends on how you define the Tea Party platform.
Extreme,
in terms of
ultra-conservative.
If you define it that way, then
non-willing to compromise. When you take a look at our current city council, for the most part, even though we got Republicans and Democrats, they get along. I've been with them on business trips. They genuinely get along and like each other.
And I have no reason to believe why Dennis Peterson would not fit in, but to that demographic and to that setup. But the fact is that if you look at the Tea Party folks as being grassroots individuals who are passionate about their country, passionate about where our future is, passionate about issues of jobs and issues of just getting back to the basics of what we stand for, that can be a compelling argument to a lot of voters.
Good luck.
Well, let's go, Michael, Chris. What do you guys think? Can a Republican, because in the past, District 5 at one point was a Republican district before the redistricting happened in 2004. Is there a chance?
Even with the opportunity of an open seat election, which no party in power wants to have happen, the numbers are just not there, I would say, and so it probably would look like a safe Democratic seat.
And I guess there's one question. a lot of folks in that district are upset with Nancy over the issue of Independence Boulevard. Chris, do you see enough people getting upset about Nancy endorsing John and having her and the way she's felt about Independence Boulevard pushing enough people to Darrell, considering how close the vote was last time?
I don't think a Nancy Carter endorsement is anything anywhere near toxic or anything that could be a lead weight around John Autry. I think, if anything, it helps his campaign, and knowing that Darrell Bonaparte is a frequent candidate. He ran against Nancy in the 2009 primary and lost. I think, whoever wins the primary is going to be the representative on city council.
Right. Well, we can, of course, all of us congratulate Andy Doolin. He was the only one to file for District 6, so he will more than likely be representing that district, which leads us to our last district, the South Charlotte District 7. District 7 has a very heavy Republican registration, 43%. More than likely, the Republicans would win that if there was a general, but there is only a primary. Warren Cooksey filed on the very first day, very first hour, in fact. Oddly enough, Jay Privet filed on the very last 2 hours of filing day. Warren is the sitting council member, has been there for 4 years now, and Jay is someone who we have seen come out against the transit plan, saying that it's cost too much money. He's written several letters to the paper, written several articles online, even gone so far as to say that Pat McCrory and Tom Tillis are in the pockets of the chamber. So I mean, do we see District 7 supporting somebody like Jay, or do we think that the center's going to hold here, and that Warren's going to make it to the primary? Chris.
Well, I would anticipate Councilman Cooksey surviving the primary, mainly because, and my involvement with Jay Privet has been to see him at city council meetings and transit meetings talking about transit, and I don't think he and Councilman Cooksey are that far apart on the idea of, say, the streetcar. So if Jay is running solely on a transit platform, on his views on transit, I don't know that he's going to get that much traction, because I think his views are pretty similar to Councilman Cooksey's.
Yeah, I mean, when incumbents are challenged within their primary, party primary, it generally takes something like a kind of scandalous event, something really dramatic to happen. There's been none of that with Warren, and I don't see a real stiff challenge being presented there.
Joel?
No, I agree with you. Going back to District 6 and District 7, similar to the way that you talked about 1, the 2, 3, and 5. We ran a candidate against Andy Doolin a couple years ago, Jane Balchitry, and she was a conservative business person. It didn't work out at all. I mean, as conservative as she wanted to come across, and it just didn't. Republicans are going to stick with their own in 6 and 7, and I think what we're going to get, Andy and Warren will continue to be those council members until they decide that they want to give it up.
Gideon, I know you can't comment one way or the other as to who you think is going to win, but how do you think Republicans are gonna? Is there going to be a lot of Republican turnout? Are you guys planning on pushing the GOP GOTV efforts?
Well, I mean, considering this is our only primary, I don't know that we'll necessarily push the get out the vote efforts for that. But that said, we will be doing our best to educate the voters in District 7 about who the candidates are and provide them as many opportunities to learn about both of them throughout the process.
And plus, I think Warren has large name recognition, not just in the district but in the city. He is one of the more social media savvy, council
That's true. We never really did discuss social media.
But, so if you want to go on, want to go on name recognition, it's no contest.
Even though he's a conservative and Republican, he's still likable.
Right. Right.
I mean, he doesn't.
And that's the key, isn't it? Ultimately, the key is going to be whether or not you feel like you can sit down and have a drink with somebody.
He doesn't rub you the wrong way. You may, have to sit there and listen to him go on and on and on. But he has a few points every once in a while.
Yes, well, it's going to definitely be interesting. We've got a lot of great candidates running this year, and it's going to be a situation where we may see the council change quite a bit, or we may see no change at all. So ultimately, we'll see what happens. And for those individuals who want to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay involved, keep coming back here to the State of Mecklenburg on CLT Blog to get your information on this race, the other races, and the rest of politics in Charlotte. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us.